Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the great introduction. We did have a thought that you might not be able to match the names with the people, since there's 3 possible female names. So we'll do a quick introduction again. My name is Kacey Hanson, and I do work at the University of Texas at Austin at the Dell Medical School. I'm in the Department of Population Health, and so one of the things that we do there is identify social determinants of health, things outside of the clinic that might impact people's health. And so food is one of those things. We all need it, and it's very difficult for some to get it, right? So I'll be leading this panel this afternoon. Your far left, we'll start with Andrea Abel. She is the Executive Director at Farmshare Austin, and I'll share a little bit about the organizations as well. Yes, round of applause, round of applause. We have in the center Lisa Barden. She's also the Executive Director over at Keep Austin Fed. And then to my right, yes, claps for Lisa. And then Ashton Cumberbatch Jr. Is the President and Director over at Equidad ATX. So our panelists. All right, well, I've pulled out my cheat sheet as well. Just want to give you a bit of an overview about these different organizations. So I'm going to start with Farmshare Austin. And this is just, again, a summary. We definitely would encourage you, if you're not familiar with these organizations, to look them up. Farmshare is a 10-acre certified organic farm. They basically cultivate next-gen organic farmers and also clearly distribute low-cost organic produce and shelf-stable items. So Andrea's going to give you a little bit more information about that. Keep Austin Fed is a food rescue organization that distributes to about 70-plus organizations, and those organizations can range from, feeding children to older adults, clearly. They also work with non-faith-based and faith-based community organizations. So, and then last but not least, Equidad Austin is a nonprofit really that values place-based planning and race equity. So food is connected to that. Their mission is to work in the Eastern Crescent, and they want to be a catalyst for basically collaborating with other organizations in order to bring about holistic and equitable development. So I'm going to basically give them an opportunity to just share a little bit about how their work, though they do mobile access, food access work, how their work differs from one another. So whichever one of you would like to start.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be here today. Farmshare Austin has a mission to grow a healthy, just, and equitable local food system, and we do that by increasing community food access and cultivating new farmers. In fact, 2 of our Farmer Starter graduates are here, and our education director is here. We take the approach of the whole food system. You have to have farmers, you have to have land, you have to have food access. And so through that approach, we are on a 10-acre certified organic farm where we teach our beginning farmer classes for adults. Most of the food that we grow goes directly into our food access work, which is a partnership with the City of Austin called Fresh for Less, where we aggregate food from our farm, other local and Texas farms, healthy grocery items, and we serve 22 zip codes in the Eastern Crescent of Austin and Travis County. Prior to the pandemic, we ran mobile markets. We were meeting people where they were. We were at YMCAs and community health centers and churches and schools. Everything we sell is at reduced price. We accept SNAP and double up food bucks. With the pandemic, we had to close the markets, obviously, and we switched within 2 weeks to home curbside delivery for folks. People could order by phone, people can order online, and same ingredient mix of everything, still SNAP, double up food bucks, no delivery fee, no minimum charge.
Hi, I'm Lisa Barden. I'm with Keep Austin Fed, and as Kacey said, we are a food rescue organization. So what that means is we collect surplus food from grocery stores, restaurants, catering companies, etc. We take the unsold food and we get it out to the neighbors in need. So you see one of the hashtags up there is zero hunger, zero waste. And so what we do is we keep perfectly good food from actually going into the waste stream itself. We are not dumpster diving. We are working very closely with these food businesses to make sure that we get the food before it ends up in the waste stream, because there are a lot of people who need it. out there. And then, as Andrea said, we meet them where they are. So if it's, if you're in a job training program, you don't necessarily have time to go to the food pantries Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. We bring the food to the job training programs. We work with Easter Seals. We work with organizations like Goodwill to get food to the people as they're going through job training program. If you're in addiction recovery, you may be in a residential facility for addiction recovery. We bring the food to those facilities. And so they're not having to change their schedules, scramble to find where they can get food from. We have been doing, the country, the United States, we've been doing emergency food distribution for 40 years, and we're not making a dent in things. And so the process has to change. And it's not about emergency food anymore, particularly in a place like Austin, where we're getting skyrocketing real estate values, and we're getting, a greater gap between wages and stuff like that. It's not about emergency food all the time. People have to make decisions, and they're having to make decisions between whether they're going to eat good, healthy, nutritious food, or whether they're going to pay to keep their lights on. And so part of what Keep Austin Fed does is try and take the excess food and get it to those people in need. I heard somebody say earlier today that by 2050, we're going to have a global population of 10 billion people, and so we need to double our food production. And I'm here to say that we don't. We have so much food going to waste that if we collected even a quarter of the amount of food that goes to waste, everybody in this world could be fed. So that's our bet.
All right, thanks. Once again, my name's Ashton Cumberbatch, and I'm with Equidad ATX. We are a catalyst for the acceleration of holistic, equitable, sustainable, and transformative development throughout the Eastern Crescent. And we do that in focusing on a variety of ways. We focus on mixed income housing. We focus on education, world-class education, cradle through career. And we focus on community health and wellness, right, from the top of your head, from the bottom of your feet, and that includes mental health as well. We focus not necessarily on sick care, but on well care, preventive as well. One of the initiatives inside our umbrella of community health and wellness is Live Well, Viva Bien, and that's what I'm up here to talk about today. That's a mobile ecosystem, all right, focusing not just on the food aspect, which is very important and innovative, and I'll talk more about that, but also on some of the other issues that are social determinants of health. So part of the ecosystem, for instance, will include one of our partners is Texas Workforce Solutions, to bring workforce solutions to many of the folks in the Eastern Crescent. We have community care to bring health and wellness. We have Austin Public Library to work on literacy, et cetera. There's no library east of 183. For those of you outside of Austin, that doesn't mean anything to you, but for those of you here, that means a lot. So we have several partners that to address most of the social determinants of health, and that's the mobile ecosystem. The reason we have it is because beginning in 1928, actually beginning before that, codified in 1928, was a 1928 master plan, which said that folks that look like me and Latinx folks had to move east of what was then East Avenue, but what we now call IH-35. And if they didn't want to move, they had an incentive. We won't connect you to public utilities. And the whole point of it was to make sure that the city did not have to follow the separate but equal. They were tired of building 2 schools, 2 water fountains, 2 parks, et cetera. So you say, well, 1928, that was so long ago. Well, that plan was ratified by subsequent city councils up through at least 1957. And the consequences of that we're still living with today. So when you look at the Eastern Crescent, right, 70% Black and Latinx population. Only 25% of the folks over there have a BA degree or higher. 25% don't have a high school diploma. 80% of the kids on free and reduced lunch. There's a zip code in the Eastern Crescent. If you live there, you're stated to live 21 years less than if you live in a zip code in west of 35. So the disparities that come with that don't come because the folks there don't know how to live. They come there because it was an intentional effort to make sure that their lives were inequitable. Not only did they force folks to live there, but then they weakened the zoning laws so that things that folks did not want west of 35, city dump, recycling plants, tank farms, et cetera, would in fact be able to thrive east of 35. And imagine all the health consequences that come from living among those petrochemicals. So that's the why of what we're doing. And the transportation issues, what we're trying to address with our mobile ecosystem. Last thing I'll say before Kacey shuts my mic off, we talk about the connection between transportation. So there's a neighborhood, Del Valley. If you live there, you want to go to a grocery store, not a dollar store, but a real grocery store. You had to get in your car and travel a minimum of 20 minutes. But suppose you don't have a car. 3 buses, 1 hour to get groceries. That's not equitable. That's not right. And those of us who can, those in power, those with influence, need to do what we can to make sure that the folks who live there, they didn't create that community. The folks who live there have equitable, accessible, or have equitable access to nutritional food.
Thank you for those. So we've started the conversation a little bit about transportation, which for those of you who don't know, transportation is definitely one of those social determinants of health. Let's speak a little bit more deeply about your specific mobile program and how it addresses that particular social determinant and or others. So I think some of you have kind of alluded to a few, but let's dive into your specific program and how you're addressing transportation and or other social determinants of health.
Yeah, I'll get started. So as I said, part of what Keep Austin Fed does is we try and meet people where they are, and we do that through a pool of about 150 volunteers. So our volunteers go and pick up the surplus food from the business that's donating it to us. They load up their cars, they take it directly to one of our partner organizations to distribute the food. So we're taking the food directly from the grocery store directly to the senior residential facility, for example. And then the food is getting distributed immediately. So we focus primarily on perishable foods. So whether that's bulk produce, whether it's prepared meals, like I said, it could be catered food. We work with a couple of farms around town, so we get food. I mean, it doesn't get any fresher than straight out of the ground. And so that food is going straight to these communities where they're not having to travel. If they don't have a car, or they can't drive a car, or for whatever reason their transportation is limited, the food is coming to them and they're able to make choices from the food that's getting distributed to them. And again, we're doing it. We are basically just the logistics arm. We're the logistics and transportation arm of what we do. We're just making the arrangements with the food donor and the recipient organizations, and they're kind of taking it from there.
Lisa, quick question. So once the food is there a purchase that's being made, or, okay.
No, there's no purchase. Everything is being done for free. The food, there's no cost to the food donor, there's no cost to the recipient organization, there's no cost to the end consumer. Everything is being done for free.
So first I want to say Fresh for Less and all the programs that we do, they are not the answer, right? We are all Band-Aids on a systemic, very old problem that at some point in time, we decided as a society that one person was more valuable than another person. And we codified that. And that is just at the core of the work that we do and trying to change that. In terms of access to transportation, like I said, we meet people where they are. We ran the mobile markets where we were going to places that had identified and said, we want to have you here as a market. We did not ever open a market in a place where we weren't first contacted and said that we want you to be there. And the basis of the program initially was based on focus groups that were done with the city of Austin to determine how the city was going to support food access work. And that resulted in a 2016 City Council funding, that's annual funding now for a variety of food access work, including Fresh for Less. When we switched to curbside delivery at home, we ran into, we learned a lot very quickly. One thing we learned, which smack dab, was the digital divide, and it absolutely overlays the Eastern Crescent and the 22 zip codes that we serve and folks that didn't have that type of access, which in some ways is, it's a type of, in some ways it is a mobility access. The other thing that we found is that we lost a lot of customers from the mobile markets because they didn't have that digital access. But we gained a whole bunch of other customers who probably never could have come to our mobile markets because of mobility issues, whether it is that lack of transportation, not a reliable car, not on a bus line, or the family has one car and the person who leaves for the day to go work takes the car because there isn't a reliable bus situation, or people who were mobility impaired and couldn't leave home, or folks who were caring for medically fragile family members or were home taking care of their kids. And so when we are going to reopen our mobile markets at the end of this month, we're going to continue to do the curbside delivery paired with the mobile markets to make sure that we can hit those transportation needs of as many people as possible.
Andrea, can you speak also to the purchase of the produce that you have and a little bit about Double Up Food Bucks?
Yes, well, first of all, I want to say that we purchase full price from all the farmers that we source from. We never expect a farmer to subsidize the price of the good food that they grow and the hard work that they put into growing. So 30% of our customers use SNAP and Double Up Food Bucks. And Double Up Food Bucks is an incentive program. So for every dollar that somebody spends using their SNAP card, they get a Double Up Food Buck that gives them an additional $1 to purchase produce. So already our prices are reduced. We tie our prices to an H-E-B on Springdale Road in Northeast Austin, and they are tied to within 10% of the conventional produce at the grocery store. So what we are selling is farmers market quality produce, and it's tied to within 10% of a conventional produce at a grocery store, and then the SNAP and the Double Up Food Bucks. And at one point, I don't know if this is still true, but during the pandemic, we were the only source where you could purchase your groceries, get them delivered for free, use your SNAP and Double Up Food Bucks, and also use cash, which is really important for folks that don't have access to credit.
Thank you. Ashton?
So our mobile food initiative is called Live Well, Viva Bien, and it's centered around the donation of retired Capital Metro bus to us, which we are retrofitting into a mobile market or a mobile grocery store. A majority of the food in that mobile grocery store, we've actually given to the food bank, the Central Texas Food Bank, and so they'll operate and maintain it. So we talk about teamwork makes the dream work. There was no need for our organization to hire a bus driver, to get into that market when we already had an organization in town that was very good at it and serving multiple counties throughout Central Texas. So we give them the bus, we have the funds to have it retrofitted, we have the funds for 2 years of maintenance and operations, thanks to the help of great folks at Austin Public Health and Episcopal Health Foundation, Lowell Wright Foundation, and Bank of America, et cetera. And so that's sort of the cornerstone of the mobile ecosystem. And as I mentioned before, it's not just food, it's workforce development, it's literacy, it's financial literacy. Texas Capital Bank will have their mobile unit out. It's community health care and others that are out there, WIC and eligibility services. And these mobile services, except for the mobile grocery store, existed, but they weren't coordinated. So if you lived in a particular neighborhood, you didn't know if on Monday you were getting food or if it was going to come books, and then there was another day in this week. And so what we brought to it is coordination and synchronization. So at a given place, at a given time, in a particular neighborhood, you know what's coming, and it's a variety of services and products that'll be there. Again, that whole vision of holistic, which is very important to us. We follow the purpose-built communities model, and through the initiative of the Spirit of East Austin and recommendations that came through the Mayor's Task Force on Institutional Racism, Systemic Inequities, place-based planning was one of the things folks wanted, and co-creation. It's so important to get the residents that you're serving involved in it. Don't just hand them a survey and say, I figured out what's best for your life, all right? I had to be cured of that mentality, right? It's about getting them engaged in it and valuing the expertise they have from their lived experience, and compensating them for that, et cetera. So that's important. So we envisioned, right now the bus hasn't started. It's soon to go to the retrofitter. But in the interim, Central Texas Food Bank is doing deliveries. We're in 3 communities right now, 4 times a month, and it's just food. And later on this month, or the beginning of next month, the other services will join in.
Excellent. Thank you all. So let's pivot a little bit. You've gotten very good at that during this pandemic. So I have a question more so thoughtful about how you came to this work. So the thought is there might be some folks here who are coming from different careers, are clearly interested in food access, and I think each of you has a little bit of a story about how you came to this place. So if you could just share briefly about your background and what brought you to this work.
Well, briefly, in being a lawyer and a minister just don't work. That's a great question. I'll streamline it this way. So I have, as I mentioned, I'm a lawyer, minister. The term shalom means something to me, completeness, wholeness. And there's a scripture that talks about the fact that my role is to, as a Christian, is to make sure the community in which I've been sent, Central Texas Austin, or Central Texas, is complete, that I pursue that completeness. And if it succeeds, if it's whole, then I can be whole. So it's sort of a, first them side of model. That's part of it. And I've spent some time, not just practicing law, but in the business community, volunteering a number of years with in education with AISD, et cetera. Spent 11 years with Ascension Health, and that's where I learned and developed relationships with a lot of folks in health, learned about social determinants of health, began meeting some of the folks up on this platform, Lisa and Andrea, and it just sort of all came together. I was volunteering with the mayor's office in 2015, was hearing the cries of the community, as I mentioned, Spirit of East Austin, Task Force on Institutional Racism, Systemic Inequities, which I was one of the project managers for, and it just got to a point where I heard about the purpose-built communities, et cetera, and had them come in and look at it and determine not only should it take place, but I should be involved in creating an affiliate here. And so I asked 3 colleagues of mine, Jay Haley, Kaziki Prince, and Alba Serrano, said, hey, I'm about to jump off this cliff. Would y'all mind jumping off with me? And they said yes. And so that's the short version of how I got into this, and I just had the idea for creating a mobile grocery store out of a bus, and then developing that into a mobile ecosystem. So it's, thanks. Thanks.
I said he did it.
I'll try and keep my version pretty brief too, but I was a software developer by birth, and my job was to make cushy jobs a little bit cushier, and that just wasn't very fulfilling for me. And so after 22 years of doing that, I left that job with no real goal in sight about what I was going to do next. And I just so happened in my fun employment days of watching a movie called Just Eat It, a documentary called Just Eat It, where it was some Canadian couple decided that for 6 months they were going to only eat off surplus food. And so I was like, that's cool. Great for people who don't have jobs. And so I went down to my local grocery store, and I walked into the produce department, and the guy happened to be culling bananas. And I was like, what are you going to do with those bananas? He said, we're just going to compost them. And I was like, well, can I just buy some of those bananas? And he said, why wouldn't you want these bananas? These are fresher bananas. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to cut them up, put them in the freezer, put them in my smoothies. They're fine. He's like, all right, hold on. He walks away for a while, comes back, and gives me a bag full of bananas that said, reduced for quick sale, 10 cents. And so I walked out, paid 11 cents, walked out with my 2 bunches of bananas, and I was like, I could eat like this every day for practically nothing. And so then I had learned about Keep Austin Fed, and I started volunteering with them. And I did it really to address the food waste aspect of it, because I knew how prevalent that was in Austin. I had no idea how many amazing organizations there are, how many amazing nonprofit organizations there are in Austin that help so many people. And the numbers, I think the last numbers I saw were that there's about 165,000 people in the Austin area that face food insecurity on a regular basis. And there is no reason in any urban environment especially that anybody should ever go hungry. And so when our 100% volunteer organization lost their volunteer executive director and they were looking for somebody else to fill in, they came to me knowing that I was jobless at that point and said, would you like to volunteer and do that? And I said, well, I actually would like to do it, but not as a volunteer. And so I worked with them over the years to find some funding, and so we are now up to 3 full-time paid employees, along with our 150 volunteers. So.
150 volunteers? That's amazing. Well, I've been eating since I was born. I started in food and agricultural policy. I started on the big stuff. And throughout my career, I got waylaid out of food directly. Well, actually, before that, I moved to Texas because I wanted to work for Jim Hightower, who was the ag commissioner. And I did work for him in the Farm Worker Protection Program before he lost re-election. And then I got waylaid out of food for a long time, working in sustainable communities and every aspect of sustainable communities. And then about 6-7 years ago, I started seeing this organization called Farmshare in my Instagram feed. And I was so drawn to this mission of beginning farming and cultivating the next generation of farmers and regrowing a farming community. And the idea that the food went to food access, and that fundamental idea that all of that is predicated on access to land and all the barriers that go into that. And so I just started having conversations with the folks at Farmshare. And the more I learned about it, the more I just felt drawn that I really needed to be at that organization, that I wanted to be at that organization, and I wanted to help that organization grow and become sustainable on its own.
Excellent. Do we have time for questions from the audience? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes? Any questions?
We are located about 10 miles east of the airport off of Highway 71 on the Colorado River. Look us up and come visit.
We got a question there in the back.
Given your experience here in the city of Austin, what do you think the biggest barriers that the city itself puts in place to increase access to food and land for farming?
Well, the biggest barriers are low wages and high housing costs. And I mean, that's taking up most of everybody's income. And transportation. Well, we could just start layering here. Yeah, there's more than that. Land code? Yeah, land code, yeah. Oh, yeah. The price of land within Travis County is just phenomenal. It's just a huge barrier to farming.
So I have a question. This is probably for you, Liz. In food rescue, how do you approach the hurdle of the liability issues with specifically grocery stores? You know, that, I mean, they face potentially liability issues by donating food that they can't sell. So how do you address that with them?
There's actually a federal liability protection called the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act, which relieves those grocery stores or those food permitted businesses of liability as long as the food that they donate is done in good faith and without gross negligence. There's a process right now being proposed to change the wording to define exactly what gross negligence means, so that more places will do that. That is actually the number one sort of obstacle that we hit from all these businesses, is saying, somebody will say that they got sued once, and so they don't do it. But that is not true. There's not been a successful lawsuit since 1996 when the federal liability protection was signed into bill.
Do you guys process the food as well, or you just
We do not process it. We collect it and then we redistribute it. So it comes in the format it comes in, it goes right back out. We are actually looking now at some commercial kitchen space so that when we do get these large pans of food from catering companies, for example, we can at least repackage it into individual portions because those can be more easily distributed to multiple people.
The Farmshare program, how many students have gone through that program, and how many of those students actually have a farm based on that program around here in Central Texas?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm going to throw that. I think we have 66 graduates since our program started in 2014. And since the pandemic started, our class size has tripled from about 4 students per class to about 12 students per class. And that comes directly from a huge increase in the applicants. We actually have to have a waiting list now. And I believe, Michelle, what's the latest figure for folks that are farming? And
I don't have an exact number of how many people are farming here in Central Texas, but we have 40% of our graduates have started their own business. It may not have been a farming business. We have people who are doing, value-added goods, making canned goods, or some sort of food-related business. But 80% of our graduates are either farming or working in the food system in some way. And we do consider people who are farm workers to be farmers. We don't have to have land to be a farmer. And I'd say that kind of goes back to that first question. The course actually allows for people to learn about the business and about farming, and people have the choice to whether or not they want to own their own or possibly go to another farm and learn, and then possibly purchase land and farm on their own. I learned that from a focus group that Farmshare did. Yes, yes. Any other questions?
This isn't really a question, but an observation that maybe you can comment on. I wasn't expecting to get a chance to ask a question, so you get what I can offer. It seems to me that we probably weren't wasting all this food when we were an agrarian society that wasn't as wealthy as we are today. Now we're one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and we waste 40% of our food. So there's been a little mismatch, and it's just weird. It's just what's happened here. So I'm just wondering, if you can comment on that. I mean, we can't turn back the clock. I don't think we're going back to all of us being individual farmers. Food waste is an incredible problem. It's a bad climate problem as well.
Yeah, I'll agree that the problem has definitely gotten worse. It's a global problem, though, and it's not just in the wealthy countries. The food waste is wasted for different reasons in different regions, because it may just be that there's no refrigerated transportation of food, and so the food goes to waste before the people actually get a chance to consume it. Here in the United States, it is more because we are used to having a lot of selection. We want to be able to look at 500 apples to make sure we get the one that we want. And so I think that is an issue, and people are not shopping locally as much anymore. We're not giving the money back into our economy as much as people used to do. I think it'd be really interesting if the delivery services continue for the next 10, 15, 20 years. I think it'd be really interesting to see how much waste is reduced if people aren't going into the grocery stores and making the selections themselves on the food that they want, but they're just hiring somebody else to go pick 3 apples out of the bunch, and those delivery services maybe aren't quite as selective about the apples they're picking. It'll be interesting to see how much that changes the amount of food waste, particularly in grocery stores, because they're not going to have these giant displays to make us feel like we're getting the best of the best.
And I'll just add, we had an opportunity to sit around a round table for regional food planning. And there was a farmer who was present for that and brought in a box of grapefruit and shared with us that the grapefruit that were in those boxes would not be sellable because they were too large, okay? And the thought is, to Lisa's point, is that when you go to the grocery store, all that you see has to look similar. They want for everything to be uniform so that you can just pick one and go. but there's a lot of ununiformity in the food that we grow. And so I think Lisa's point is a good one. I actually have a box of food that's delivered to my house from a vendor, sometimes local, sometimes a little bit further away, and they tell me, this lemon's gonna be a little larger than you're expecting, or this squash is gonna be a little smaller than expected, but it's just me. So I can deal with that disuniformity, if you will. So I think opening our minds to, some of the other ways that we can get our food. We always would highly encourage people to start growing their own food. Maybe we have a different appreciation for it if we saw it actually come out of the ground. So there are things we can do. But let's just be mindful that our culture tries to sell us something and we buy it, so we all take a little bit of responsibility for that. Great question. One last question here, and then I'm going to do one final question for the group as well.
Faces, sorry, you're kind of first boots on the ground, first facing the issues directly yourselves. If you had your wish of what you could do in this world, are there any crazy ideas that you have out there and you're just like, how can I incorporate that? How can I make that happen? Do you have anything like that that tickles your brain in the middle of the night going, gosh, I wish we could do that somehow? If you put it into the universe, could you possibly get an answer from this crowd, do you think?
I've got one, but it's not my original idea. It came from, I think, one of our students with Farmer Starter, and that would be to treat farming like a public service, like a firefighter or a teacher, so that growing for your community is just something intrinsic that you get for living in that community. So treating growers as public servants.
The neighborhood farmer.
Exactly.
Instead of the neighborhood fireman or policeman. God, look
And
at
if we
that.
turn that around, and again, it's not my idea, it was somebody else's idea, but if you turn that concept around, I think it really changes the way we think about access to food.
And some of our best ideas came from someone else. So along those lines, we have our mobile ecosystem and the mobile grocery. But it's not a replacement for brick and mortar. It's a bridge until. We're only stepping in because of the lack of infrastructure that authorities have placed in the various communities. So one thing to look at is the formula for putting in grocery stores, comprehensive grocery stores. So one community was told, you need 60,000 more rooftops before we're gonna allow you to drive less than 20 or 30 minutes to get to a grocery store. Now, we need to take a look at what that formula is, all right? And so I think that's one of the things. We have too many communities that for too long, 40 years, one of our communities has been in existence without a comprehensive grocery store. So I think that's one of the things. What is the formula? And what can those in power and authority or influence do to help influence the policies and formula that come about to create mobile grocery stores? And how can innovation help? So it's not just brick and mortar. I don't know what the newest form of grocery store looks like, but let's not limit ourselves to just what we see, the corner of 7th and Pleasant Valley.
Thank you for your questions. I have one follow-up question for them. As you can tell, they seem to be friends, right? We heard a little bit in that last panel just about competition and camaraderie as well. And so I do want for this panel to speak to what doing this work looks like when they're all doing similar things, possibly in different areas, but also how they're able to collaborate with other folks in their industry as well. So if you guys could just take a moment just to summarize your collaborations and or what friendly competition looks like here in Austin, Texas.
Well, I think we said earlier, it's a big sandbox. I think there's room for everybody, unfortunately, because the need is so great. At Farmshare, we like to say we're fiercely collaborative. None of the things that we do can happen just through us. It takes a community, and I love creating creating synergies. I love creating relationships. I love working together to make everything that we do bigger and stronger. And it gives me goosebumps when I forge, when we forge those relationships and nurture those relationships. I mean, those relationships are everything.
Yeah, and I want to say that, obviously there is some competition, and it's sort of the nature of the beast in the nonprofit world is that everybody's competing for funding, and that's too bad that we all have to do that. And so that's where the competition comes in. But I think we also all recognize the need for this sort of multiple layers of food access, because it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Farmers markets, I think, are a great way to build community around food. I wish we would all go shop at farmers markets all the time, and I wish that farmers markets happened every single day and at convenient hours and everything else. We've lost that sense of community around food, I think, and I wish we could go back to building that sense. But providing the layered food access so that people have more agency when it comes to deciding where they're going to get their food from and how they're going to get it is something that we all work together, and so many organizations in Austin work together to do that, and I think that's really important. And like I said, it's just unfortunate when it comes to funding that we do feel like we have to be a little bit competitive, but it's kind of the nature of the beast.
And so strategic partnerships, collaboration is one of our core values. And so our fruit grows in other people's trees. So at our mobile ecosystem, our mobile grocery store, we're going to have farm share produce there. We're going to have some of the food that Lisa rescues. We're going to have food from Urban Roots. I've already mentioned the Central Texas Food Bank. I'm pointing to a chair. She's not there anymore, but we're going to carry some prepared food from Cook's Nook, their Mosaic line, et cetera. So it's about that collaboration. I'm not trying to duplicate good work that's already being done. I'm just trying to help them scale up and increase access for residents to the good services that are already out there. So yeah, absolutely, we believe in collaboration, and we have some great partners, not only on the stage, but elsewhere, because it really does take all of us to get the work done. If we have a systemic institutional problem, and we need to be as intentional as folks were about creating the inequities as we are about creating equity and access so that everyone can have this basic right of nutrition and healthy food.
I've got a couple of seconds, so I would ask something of you all. Thank you, first of all, for being attentive and attending this session. Please be intentional. Look up these organizations. See if there's ways that you can encourage them, support them, spread the word about them, because they're doing great work. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.